When the world plunged into the chaos of World War II, the Allied powers faced an enormous challenge. Nazi Germany had conquered much of Europe, the Soviet Union was locked in a brutal battle on the Eastern Front, and Britain stood almost alone against the Axis threat. In this darkest hour, the United States entered the war, bringing fresh hope and massive resources. However, coordinating the combined efforts of multiple Allied nations required not only military might but exceptional leadership and strategic planning. The man who emerged to meet this monumental challenge was Dwight D. Eisenhower, an American general whose rise to supreme command would change the course of history. Unlike many battlefield commanders who had years of combat experience, Eisenhower's military background was largely in staff and planning roles. He had not fought in combat during World War I but had shown remarkable skills in organizing and managing complex operations. When the United States joined the war after the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, the Allied leadership needed a commander who could unite British, American, French, and Canadian forces into a single, effective fighting machine. Eisenhower was that man. Eisenhower's first major test came with Operation Torch, the Allied invasion of North Africa in late 1942. This was a risky and complex operation. The plan was to land Allied forces on the coasts of Morocco and Algeria, territories controlled by Vichy France, a government officially neutral but collaborating with Nazi Germany. The operation required not just military force but delicate diplomacy to avoid fighting the French forces stationed there. Eisenhower was tasked with coordinating the efforts of American and British troops and managing the political tensions that came with working alongside the French resistance and Free French forces led by Charles de Gaulle. Operation Torch was more than just a military invasion, it was a test of Eisenhower's leadership and ability to manage diverse and sometimes conflicting groups. He had to deal with the aggressive German General Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, whose Afrika Korps was a formidable opponent. Despite these challenges, Eisenhower's careful planning and coordination led to the successful capture of key North African ports and the eventual surrender of Axis forces in Tunisia. This victory marked the first major defeat for the Axis powers on the European continent and provided the Allies with a crucial base for launching further operations into Europe. Eisenhower's success in North Africa earned him the respect of Allied leaders like British Prime Minister Winston Churchill and US President Franklin D. Roosevelt. More importantly, it demonstrated that Eisenhower could handle not just battlefield tactics but the broader strategic and diplomatic challenges of coalition warfare. His ability to keep multiple nations working together, despite their different agendas and egos, was rare and vital. By early 1943, the Allies had set their sights on the Italian peninsula. Eisenhower played a significant role in planning and overseeing the invasion of Sicily and Italy, known as Operation Husky. The campaign was grueling and involved intense fighting against entrenched German and Italian forces. However, the invasion successfully removed Italy from the war and weakened the Axis position in Europe. Eisenhower's leadership during this phase was marked by patience, strategic foresight, and an understanding of the importance of both military action and political maneuvering. Despite his growing reputation, Eisenhower remained a humble and pragmatic leader. He was aware of the immense responsibility resting on his shoulders and understood the human cost of war. He was not known for flamboyant battlefield heroics but rather for his calm, steady hand and ability to manage complexity. This approach made him highly effective as Supreme Commander but also earned him criticism from more aggressive generals who favored bold, direct action. Eisenhower's true test came with the planning and execution of Operation Overlord, the Allied invasion of Normandy, France, on June 6, 1944, commonly known as D-Day. This operation was the largest amphibious invasion in history and required meticulous coordination of land, sea, and air forces from multiple countries. As Supreme Commander, Eisenhower was responsible for the success or failure of this mission, which would determine the fate of the free world. The planning for D-Day was an enormous undertaking. Eisenhower had to oversee not just military logistics but also deception campaigns to mislead the Germans about the invasion location and timing. He had to manage the egos and rivalries of his top generals, including American generals George Patton and Omar Bradley, and British General Bernard Montgomery. The pressure was immense. A single mistake could doom the entire operation. On the night of June 5, 1944, Eisenhower faced a critical decision, whether to proceed with the invasion despite bad weather forecasts. After consulting with meteorologists and his commanders, he decided to launch the attack on June 6. This decision proved crucial to the operation's success and highlighted Eisenhower's ability to balance risk with opportunity. The D-Day landings were brutal and costly, with heavy casualties, especially at Omaha Beach. However, Eisenhower's planning and leadership ensured that Allied forces established a foothold in Normandy, which led to the liberation of France and ultimately the defeat of Nazi Germany. Eisenhower's role during this period exemplified his leadership style: calm under pressure, focused on coalition unity, and strategic vision. He was a leader who preferred consensus and careful planning over rash decisions and personal glory. His ability to keep a complex and diverse alliance together through the war's most challenging phases was instrumental in the Allied victory. In summary, Eisenhower's rise from a staff officer with no combat experience to supreme commander of the Allied forces in Europe was extraordinary. Through Operation Torch and the invasion of Italy, he proved his capability as a leader of coalition warfare. His orchestration of the D-Day invasion demonstrated his strategic brilliance and steady hand under pressure. These achievements laid the foundation for the eventual defeat of Nazi Germany and the liberation of Europe. The story of Dwight D. Eisenhower in World War II is not just about military tactics and battlefield victories. It is a testament to leadership, unity, and the power of strategic vision in times of crisis. As we look back on this chapter of history, Eisenhower stands out not just as a general but as the embodiment of the Allied spirit that brought together nations and people to overcome one of the darkest chapters in human history. Breaking Fortress Europe: The Road to Normandy and Beyond. By the middle of 1943, the tide of World War II was beginning to turn. The Allies had claimed a significant victory in North Africa, pushing Axis forces out of Tunisia and gaining a foothold on the continent. Now, the focus shifted to Europe itself, where Nazi Germany maintained a strong grip over vast territories, including France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. The daunting task of breaking through these fortified positions and liberating Western Europe was assigned to General Dwight D. Eisenhower, who had already proven his mettle in earlier campaigns. He was appointed the Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force in Europe, tasked with orchestrating what would become the largest amphibious invasion in history: Operation Overlord, the D-Day invasion. Leading an unprecedented multinational coalition, Eisenhower had to manage not only the logistical nightmare of assembling and coordinating millions of troops, thousands of ships, aircraft, and vehicles, but also the complex personalities and political interests of various Allied leaders. From British Prime Minister Winston Churchill to U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt and Soviet Premier Joseph Stalin, every leader had their expectations and demands. On the battlefield, Eisenhower's subordinates included some of the most ambitious and skilled generals of the war, such as George Patton, Omar Bradley, and Bernard Montgomery. Managing this array of powerful personalities while maintaining unity and focus on the mission was one of Eisenhower's greatest challenges. Before the full-scale invasion of France, Eisenhower's forces targeted the soft underbelly of Europe, the Italian peninsula. The invasion of Sicily in July 1943, known as Operation Husky, was a critical step in weakening the Axis powers. The campaign was a massive undertaking involving American, British, and Canadian forces conducting amphibious landings, airborne drops, and rapid advances through the island's rugged terrain. Under Eisenhower's calm and steady leadership, the Allies successfully captured Sicily in about a month, which precipitated the fall of Benito Mussolini's fascist regime in Italy. Subsequently, Italy surrendered to the Allies, though German forces quickly occupied northern Italy, leading to a prolonged and bloody campaign. Despite the slow progress, Eisenhower's management of this phase demonstrated his ability to adapt and persevere amid difficult conditions. While the Italian campaign continued, Eisenhower's primary focus shifted to planning the invasion of Nazi-occupied France. Operation Overlord required meticulous preparation and secrecy. The Allies had to decide on the exact landing sites, gather and train millions of troops, amass supplies, and coordinate naval, air, and ground forces in a synchronized assault. Eisenhower's leadership style proved essential during this period. He fostered collaboration among the Allied nations and managed the strong personalities among his generals, balancing competing ambitions and maintaining morale. Deception played a crucial role in the success of D-Day. Under Eisenhower's command, the Allies launched Operation Bodyguard, a complex series of ruses designed to mislead German intelligence about the invasion's location and timing. Fake radio transmissions, dummy tanks, and false troop movements convinced the Germans to focus their defenses on the Pas-de-Calais region, far from the actual landing beaches in Normandy. As June 1944 approached, Eisenhower faced an agonizing decision. Poor weather threatened to delay the invasion, risking the loss of surprise and months of preparation. After consulting with meteorologists and senior commanders, Eisenhower made the bold decision to proceed on June 6, a choice that required both courage and confidence. The initial hours of D-Day were brutal. Allied soldiers encountered fierce resistance, mines, machine guns, and artillery fire, especially on Omaha Beach, where American troops suffered heavy casualties. Yet, despite these hardships, the Allies secured the beachheads and began pushing inland. In the weeks following D-Day, Eisenhower's command was tested by the brutal reality of warfare in Western Europe. German forces mounted strong counterattacks, and the terrain, weather, and logistical challenges slowed the advance. However, Eisenhower's ability to maintain coalition unity and adapt strategy allowed the Allies to build momentum. By late August, Paris was liberated, signaling a major turning point in the war. Throughout this period, Eisenhower remained the steady hand guiding the Allied war effort. He was not a flamboyant battlefield commander seeking glory but a pragmatic leader focused on the bigger picture. His strength lay in managing the complex interplay of military tactics, political pressures, and human factors. Some critics argued he was overly cautious or diplomatic, but history has shown that his style was instrumental in keeping the diverse Allied forces united and effective. The months after the liberation of Paris saw the Allies push into the heart of Germany. Eisenhower's forces encountered fierce resistance, including the devastating German counter-offensive known as the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944. Despite being caught off guard, Eisenhower quickly reorganized his forces, coordinated reinforcements, and led a successful defense that ultimately crushed Germany's last major offensive on the Western Front. In the final months of the war, Eisenhower oversaw the crossing of the Rhine River and the invasion of Germany itself. His leadership ensured the efficient coordination of multiple fronts as Soviet forces advanced from the east. On May 7, 1945, Germany surrendered unconditionally, marking the end of the war in Europe and the triumph of the Allied coalition. Eisenhower's role in breaking Fortress Europe was not just about military strategy, it was about leadership on an unprecedented scale. He held together a coalition of nations and commanders, balanced competing interests, and made difficult decisions under immense pressure. His calm resolve, strategic vision, and diplomatic skill proved crucial in transforming the Allied forces into a unified, unstoppable force that defeated Nazi Germany. This chapter in Eisenhower's story highlights the importance of leadership beyond the battlefield. The success of D-Day and the subsequent liberation of Europe were as much about politics, coordination, and vision as about tanks and guns. Eisenhower's ability to see the larger picture, manage diverse personalities, and maintain focus on the mission defined his legacy as one of the greatest military leaders of the 20th century. When the Allied forces secured their foothold on the beaches of Normandy, it marked the beginning of a massive and grueling campaign that would push deep into Nazi-occupied Europe. The successful D-Day landings on June 6, 1944, were just the start. For General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the supreme commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force, the real challenge was to turn this precarious beachhead into a full-scale liberation of Western Europe. The road ahead was filled with fierce battles, complex logistics, and the ever-present need to keep a diverse coalition united against a desperate enemy. The German army, although caught off guard initially, quickly regrouped and launched determined counterattacks. Their defenses were deeply entrenched, reinforced with minefields, machine guns, artillery, and experienced troops. Eisenhower understood that breaking through these fortified positions would require patience, coordination, and relentless pressure. The initial weeks after D-Day saw brutal fighting in places like Seine and Saint-Lô, where progress was slow and casualties high. The terrain favored the defenders, and the Allies often faced difficult weather and supply issues. Yet, Eisenhower's leadership ensured that resources were continuously pushed forward, and his commanders remained focused on their objectives. One of Eisenhower's greatest challenges during this phase was managing the strong personalities among his top generals. Figures like General George S. Patton and British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery had contrasting styles and ambitions. Patton was aggressive, bold, and sometimes reckless, eager to push forward at any cost, while Montgomery was more methodical and cautious, preferring to build overwhelming strength before launching attacks. Eisenhower skillfully balanced their approaches, assigning tasks that suited their temperaments and ensuring that personal rivalries did not undermine the overall mission. His diplomatic skills were as vital as his military strategy in maintaining the fragile unity of the Allied command. Meanwhile, the German forces were not standing still. In December 1944, they launched a massive surprise counteroffensive known as the Battle of the Bulge in the dense Ardennes forest. This was Germany's last desperate attempt to split the Allied lines and retake the initiative. The attack caught the Allies off guard and caused severe losses, especially to American forces. Eisenhower's response was decisive. He rapidly coordinated reinforcements, secured critical supply routes, and encouraged his troops to hold their ground despite harsh winter conditions. His calm and effective command during this crisis helped turn the tide, and the German offensive ultimately failed, draining what little strength Germany had left. Throughout the campaign, Eisenhower was not only a military leader but also a source of morale and inspiration for his troops. He made it a point to visit frontline units, acknowledging the hardships soldiers endured and reminding them of the importance of their mission. His leadership was marked by humility. He rarely sought personal glory but consistently gave credit to his men and subordinate commanders. Eisenhower understood that victory depended on the collective effort of millions, from the infantrymen slogging through mud and blood to the sailors, pilots, and logistics personnel working behind the scenes. By early 1945, the Allied forces had pushed across the Rhine River, breaking into the heartland of Germany. Eisenhower had to coordinate this massive advance while also managing political pressures, including the complex alliance with the Soviet Union advancing from the east. He worked to ensure that the Western Allies and Soviets maintained cooperation despite underlying tensions, knowing that their combined pressure was crucial to the final defeat of Nazi Germany. On May 7, 1945, Germany officially surrendered, ending the war in Europe. Eisenhower's leadership had been central to this victory. But his contribution went far beyond battlefield tactics. He had successfully unified an unprecedented coalition of nations, each with their own interests and demands, into a single force capable of defeating one of history's most brutal regimes. His strategic vision, ability to handle complex personalities, and steady resolve under pressure made him one of the greatest military leaders of the 20th century. Eisenhower's role in the liberation of Europe was a lesson in leadership at every level. He managed the enormous logistics of moving millions of men and vast amounts of equipment across a continent at war. He made difficult decisions under uncertainty, balancing the risks of bold action against the cost in human lives. And perhaps most importantly, he built and maintained trust among diverse Allied leaders and troops, keeping the coalition together when it could have easily fractured. His leadership style was not flashy or flamboyant, it was practical, patient, and inclusive. He didn't seek battlefield heroism or dramatic gestures. Instead, he focused on the bigger picture: the successful completion of the mission and the safe return of his soldiers. This approach won him the respect of both his peers and the men under his command. The success of the Allied campaign in Western Europe also laid the foundation for the post-war world order. Eisenhower's ability to coordinate multinational forces became a model for future military alliances, including NATO. His experience showed that modern warfare was not just about armies clashing on the battlefield but about diplomacy, coalition building, and strategic planning at an unprecedented scale. In the final analysis, Eisenhower's leadership during this critical phase of World War II demonstrated the power of unity, strategy, and resilience. His decisions and actions not only changed the course of the war but also shaped the future of international cooperation and military command. With Nazi Germany's surrender in May 1945, the guns of World War II in Europe finally fell silent, but for General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the mission was far from over. His role transformed from a battlefield commander into a key architect of post-war stability and the reconstruction of a shattered continent. Eisenhower faced the enormous task of managing the occupation of Germany, overseeing the transition from war to peace, and helping to lay the groundwork for a new world order amid the ruins of Europe. The immediate aftermath of victory presented a host of challenges. Millions of displaced persons, including prisoners of war, concentration camp survivors, refugees, and former forced laborers, were scattered across the continent. Infrastructure was devastated, cities lay in ruins, and the economies of Europe were on the brink of collapse. Eisenhower, now Supreme Commander of the Allied occupation forces, had to ensure that order was maintained and that humanitarian crises were addressed swiftly. His military experience gave him the organizational skills to coordinate relief efforts, but the complexity of the situation required a delicate balance of authority and diplomacy. One of Eisenhower's critical responsibilities was overseeing the denazification and demilitarization of Germany. He was determined to prevent any resurgence of militarism or fascist ideology. Under his command, the Allied forces dismantled Germany's war industries and purged Nazi officials from positions of power. Yet, Eisenhower recognized that punitive measures alone would not guarantee lasting peace. Economic recovery and political rehabilitation were equally important. This pragmatic approach sometimes brought him into conflict with more punitive voices in the Allied leadership, but Eisenhower's vision was clear: a stable and democratic Germany was essential for the future of Europe. Eisenhower also had to navigate the emerging tensions between the Western Allies and the Soviet Union. Though both sides had fought together to defeat Nazi Germany, ideological differences soon surfaced, marking the beginning of the Cold War. Eisenhower was keenly aware of the fragile alliance and worked to maintain cooperation where possible. His diplomatic skills were as vital in these post-war negotiations as they had been on the battlefield. Managing this transition from wartime unity to peacetime rivalry required tact, patience, and a deep understanding of international politics. Meanwhile, Eisenhower's leadership and reputation soared. Recognized as the general who had orchestrated the defeat of Hitler's Europe, he became a national hero in the United States and an international symbol of effective leadership. This widespread acclaim set the stage for his transition from military to political life. In 1952, he was elected as the 34th President of the United States, bringing his strategic mindset and coalition-building skills to the highest office. As President, Eisenhower applied many of the lessons he had learned during the war to global diplomacy and domestic governance. His administration focused on maintaining peace through strength, strengthening alliances like NATO, and investing in infrastructure and technological innovation to secure America's future. His leadership style remained pragmatic, emphasizing consensus building and steady, cautious progress. Reflecting on Eisenhower's role in World War II, it becomes clear that his legacy extends far beyond battlefield victories. He exemplified the qualities of a modern leader who combined military expertise with political acumen, diplomatic skill, and an unshakable commitment to unity and peace. His ability to manage complexity, inspire cooperation, and adapt to rapidly changing circumstances helped shape not only the outcome of the war but the very structure of the post-war world. In the final analysis, Eisenhower's story is a testament to the power of effective leadership in moments of crisis. From the beaches of Normandy to the halls of the White House, his journey reflects the impact one individual can have when guided by vision, resilience, and a deep sense of responsibility. His leadership during World War II remains a benchmark for military commanders and political leaders alike, reminding us that true victory is achieved not just through force, but through unity, strategy, and the ability to build lasting peace.